Welcome to all who join this self-knowledge course conference. Today we will study a very important topic, in which we will talk about how to control nocturnal emissions and sexual falls. The objective of this topic will be to study some aspects that prevent us from achieving perfect chastity. So, this conference is focused on those people who have begun to understand the value of their sexual energy, and who, therefore, want to achieve chastity. A person who does not intend to make wise use of his energy, who has not yet understood its importance, will not find this lecture useful. But if we already understand that our sexual energy is the source of our power, and that our possibilities of achieving enlightenment are latent there, here we will find very valuable information to never lose our sexual energy again, and thus achieve perfect chastity. It is important to appreciate and treasure our sexual energy, since it is a creative energy, and if we learn to use it wisely, we can create our existential bodies. Those bodies will allow us to awaken consciousness in all dimensions of nature. That is, regenerate the physical and vital bodies and create the astral body, the mental body, and the causal body. And thus, be able to incarnate the human soul. Appreciating our sexual energy is understanding that we must not allow any psychological defect to steal it from us, and that we must stop creating more eyes or psychological defects through the expulsion of the sexual energy through orgasm and ejaculation. Once the person enters the path of regeneration, they work on themselves to abandon the vices that lead them to seek to expel their sexual energy through masturbation and through sexual intercourse. But to achieve perfect chastity, it is important also to stop losing the sexual energy in nocturnal emissions. And it is also important to work so that during sex with your partner there are no sexual falls. Let's then study the aspects that lead us to nocturnal emissions and sexual falls. Let's clarify first, what is a nocturnal emission? A nocturnal emission is the spillover, or loss of creative sexual energy during sleep. We know that, when sleeping, our astral body is active, and if sexual energy is activated through an erotic dream in the astral world, those sensations that are experienced in the astral body generate certain vibrations that reach the physical body through the silver cord. This results in the spilling of sexual energy out the physical body, which is also known as wet dreams. These tend to occur more intensely in single people. Therefore, it is very important to work on these aspects that we will see today, to avoid the loss of sexual energy while you are in the process of reaching a stable partner of the opposite sex with whom practice supra-sex. And what is a sexual fall? The loss of sexual energy during the practice of sexual transmutation is called a sexual fall. This occurs in couples who are already practicing supra-sex. They are striving to achieve chastity, but they still don't have much control over their sexual organs and over their instinct, emotion, and mind. For this reason, there continue to be sexual practices in which the person becomes overexcited and expels sexual energy. It is important then that we achieve the elimination of the eye of nocturnal emissions and the eye of sexual falls, which are composed of multiple details and aspects that prevent us from achieving perfect chastity. Perfect chastity is to never lose our sexual energy under any circumstances. We will study different aspects. We will see what are the psychological aspects that lead us to lose energy in emissions or falls. The vast majority of emissions occurs due to psychological aspects. We will also see what is related to the attacks that can be received from the Black Lodge. There we will study what is related to sleep paralysis, and attacks from witches and warlocks through the fourth dimension and during dreams. We will also see some external aspects that can affect us. And we will also talk about the aspects that occur during the practice of supra-sex. Among the psychological aspects that lead us to the loss of sexual energy in nocturnal emissions or sexual falls are the impressions. Throughout the day we receive many impressions of all kinds. Impressions are received through our 5 senses. We receive impressions through sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. Like when we see, hear, smell, taste, or touch something of a lustful nature, or that activates us to lust. These impressions negatively activate our energy centers, since upon receiving these impressions, our psychological defects generate reactions, emotions, sensations, as well as mental projections and mental chatter. Through all these untransformed impressions, our defects feed themselves and contaminate our sexual energy. Impressions can be transformed when we are in a state of wakefulness, when we observe ourselves and remember ourselves. But if we let our guard down, there is no one to transform the impression, and therefore identification occurs. Immediately we discover that some external impression activated our sexual center, we ask our Divine Mother to eliminate the psychological defect that moved inside us due to that impression. For example, I see someone I find attractive. If by observing myself I discover psychological reactions in my sexual center, I immediately judge each detail that has manifested in me, and I ask, Divine Mother, eliminate this defect. This, for every detail that I discover. Or if, for example, it is some impression that I receive through hearing, like a song with lyrics or melody that activates my lust, or hearing someone moan, or simply hearing someone tell me that I look attractive, etc. If one observes oneself at all times, one can discover that the impressions received through hearing also produces reactions from our psychological defects. The same with smells that we feel, with things that we taste, and sensations that we experience on the skin and in the body, due to a touch, a hug, a vibration, etc., which activate our sexual center. If we don't work on these impressions by immediately eliminating the psychological defects that react through emotions, sensations, tensions, and thoughts, these impressions remain recorded in our psyche and are taken by our defects to lead us to identification on the astral plane and to lead us to lose energy during sleeping hours. On the astral plane, these impressions take shape and stage, creating erotic dreams or intense scenes in which we lose sexual energy. These impressions also affect us when we go to practice supra-sex with our partner, because they return to our mind at the time of practicing sex, leading us to lose concentration and become overexcited. Furthermore, if we fall into identification with these impressions and allow our sexual energy to come into activity during the day, when practicing supra-sex, our energy will be very contaminated and heavy. Therefore, it will be very difficult, or impossible, to make that energy ascend through the spine. It is important that we reflect on the importance of abandoning the habits that lead us to constantly search and put all kinds of impressions into our minds. For example, through the frequent use of the internet and social and video platforms, people are constantly bombarding themselves with all kinds of impressions that are not transformed. All impressions that are not transformed can result in nocturnal emissions or sexual falls. Among the psychological aspects are also the identifications. When we let an impression in, and don't transform it through psychological death, but rather nourish it, it becomes an identification. This is because we identify with the defect that reacted within us due to that impression. We identify ourselves with a psychological defect when we give attention, time, and energy to that defect. And in daily life we tend to identify with many things. You can all see it. For example, one can easily identify with a process of anger, lust, greed, etc. One can become identified with lust due to a skirt one saw, with some legs one saw. One can become identified with lust due to some breasts, with some eyes, with a face, with a hair, with whatever. We can become identified with alcohol, overeating, etc. Identifications can also result in nocturnal emissions or sexual falls, because the defect with which we have identified with begins to misuse and contaminate our energy. But if one receives, for example, a visual impression, and at that moment we work on that impression, asking for the death of the defect, then there is no identification. The third of the psychological aspects that we must study is lasciviousness. Lasciviousness is the frustrated desire for sex. From lasciviousness, many lustful eyes are awakened, and we fall into feeling sexual desire with anyone we see. So, if we don't work and eliminate the different details of lasciviousness, we will be constantly feeding lust through the mind, seeking to provoke ourselves into sex with everyone we see, or seeking to provoke others. We will also fall into the constant mistake of fantasizing sexual scenes. And the problem is that we will unconsciously try to make these fantasies come true in our erotic dreams, causing a nocturnal emission. The person who wants to achieve chastity must not let in impressions that feed lasciviousness. He must work with discipline to observe and eliminate all the frustrated desire for sex, and the different details that manifest through that frustration on an emotional, mental, and sexual level. This constant frustrated sexual desire leads us to feed all the defects of lust within us, and thus, constantly put sexual energy into activity, resulting in later having a sexual fall during the practice of supra-sex, or a nocturnal emission during sleep. The fourth psychological aspect that we must pay attention to put an end to nocturnal emissions and sexual falls are the lustful details. There are many details of lust that manifest themselves in us in our daily lives. Sometimes they are small details that we don't give much importance to, but they also feed lust. A simple example could be flirting with another person. In this simple situation, many details of lust are manifested in all the centers, which are what lead us to the loss of sexual energy. In Lecture 43, we were talking in detail about all these details of lust. And if we really long for chastity, it is important that we set ourselves the daily discipline of working on eliminating all the lustful details that appear in us during our daily life, and work on meditation all those that we have nurtured in this existence. Let's remember that the only way we will achieve the power of not losing our sexual energy voluntarily or involuntarily will occur to the extent that we eliminate lust from within us, since lust is our greatest weakness. Now, there are other aspects that we must study, since they can cause the loss of creative sexual energy. Among these aspects, we must highlight the attacks that can be received from the Black Lodge. The Black Lodge is made up of all entities that seek to awaken in evil, and that subsist and obtain power through stealing the energy of others. Among these entities, witches stand out. Witches gain their powers when they steal energy from others. Therefore, when a person begins to save and fill themselves with their own energy, they will need to learn to protect that energy from parasitic entities that will try to steal it. A witch can try to steal our sexual energy during the night through the fourth dimension, which would cause the spilling of sexual energy on the physical plane. A witch attack is commonly the cause of sleep paralysis. Through the fourth dimension, they seek to make the person sexually excited and lose energy, or they make the person scared. And this, so they can steal energy from that person through that emotion of fear. Furthermore, if we practice supra-sex without closing the place with the protection conjurations, one of these entities can attack us from the fourth dimension by giving us fixed ideas, or sending us lustful waves so that we have a sexual fall, and thus they can feed on our energy. We could also receive attacks during sleep, since these entities can also enter our psychology through the fifth dimension and appear on the astral plane as very attractive and desirable people who seek to excite us sexually in order to lead us to lose energy. If we don't allow ourselves to become identified with lust during these attacks, if we eliminate from within us the defects that react to these attacks, we would be closed, and these entities wouldn't be able to steal our energy. Since what gives power to negative entities is our weakness. And our weakness are our psychological defects, especially lust. It is important to learn to defend ourselves from these attacks carried out by the Black Lodge, which implies that we must always do the spell of Bellalin and the magic circle when we go to sleep. Hence the importance of learning to conjure and keep ourselves closed for as long as possible during the day, and above all, when sexual practices are going to occur. A sexual practice without the Bellalin conjuration and the magic circle is almost equivalent to a sexual fall. Let's remember that we learned these protection conjurations in Lecture 7 of the course. It is also very important to learn and practice the Jupiter conjuration, to defend ourselves from direct attacks that we receive on the astral plane. We must also know that with steel scissors open crosswise, black mustard in a circle around the scissors, and a plea to the elemental of mustard to defend us, we can catch the witch who tries to attack us through the fourth dimension. In this supplication, we ask the Father to order our elemental intercessor to speak with the mustard elemental, and thus help trap the witch. Then with the thumb, index and third fingers raised and pointing towards the mustard circle, we make 3 circles, while we vocalize the sound of the letter S, and thus the mustard is ritualized. It is important that we learn to defend or protect ourselves when these types of attacks occur, to prevent any theft of energy. Now, among the external aspects that could affect us, there is a factor, a very important one, that we must work on, and this is the issue of foods. We must know that just as it is important to take care of the impressions with which we feed our mind, it is also important to be careful with the foods we put into our body, since there are certain foods that directly damage our sexual energy and lead us to lose it. We must avoid consuming all foods that contain pork, since pork rots creative sexual energy and has effects that can last up to 15 days. Likewise, we should avoid foods that have been cooked in containers where pork was cooked. We should also avoid eating scaleless fish, catfish, or swamp fish, which eat fecal matter. We should avoid eating farmed fish fed with sow or pig feces and anabolic. We must avoid those foods that we know are toxic, spoiled foods, etc. So, it is necessary to eat fresh foods. We should avoid sausages and cold cuts as much as possible, since the vast majority contain pork derivatives. Likewise, we must avoid the consumption of all types of liquor, since they affect sexual energy, preventing chastity, as we studied in Conference 14. Any of the above can cause nocturnal emissions or sexual falls. Another external aspect that we must take into account is the level of the cup. We all have a cup where our creative sexual energy is deposited. We will notice that we feel more sexually aroused when the cup is full or more than half full. So, anything can provoke us to sexual activity because it is instinctive. This is showing that we have to learn to manage the body's energy levels. You know very well that if it is full, it spills. When a person has his cup very full of energy, and has no one to transmute his sexual energy with, or has a partner, but cannot practice for some health reason or whatever, what must be done to prevent the cup from spilling? Well, the person must learn to sublimate his energy. Then we are going to give you the practice of energy sublimation. What is sublimating our energy? It is learning to bring the sexual energy to the brain through a breathing exercise. This exercise is called pranayama, where we will imagine our spine and our brain. And we are going to sublimate the energy through 2 ganglionic channels, known as Ida and Pingala, that we have around the spine. Here we will imagine the sexual glands and the nose. The important thing is to learn to imagine how the process occurs. On one side we find Ida, and on the other side Pingala. These are the 2 snakes that allow energy to be sublimated through the vital body, doing a breathing exercise and using the mantra, Ham Sa. We mentally pronounce the elongated Ham mantra as we inhale. And we verbally pronounce the short Sa mantra as we exhale. The inhalation lasts about 20 seconds, and the exhalation lasts approximately 2 seconds. There is a pause before inhaling again. So, to sublimate the energy, we cover our left nostril and inhale through the right nostril. The energy starts ascending from the left testicle, which is positive, and reaches the right nostril. We imagine that our energy rises and reaches the right nostril. There is a pause before inhaling again, now from the right testicle, which is negative, to the left nostril. One imagines, because to imagine is to see, that the energy is rising through these 2 conduits of Ida and Pingala. In this way we lower the level of the cup and always keep our energy at very appropriate levels, so that it is not lost or spilled at any time. In the case of women, the polarity is reversed. The signs are changed, But it is exactly the same process as in men. The ladies begin with the right ovary, and go to the left nostril, and continue through the left ovary bringing the energy to the right nostril. Sexual creative energy is produced by the brain in the pineal gland. This collects the energy of the spirit and unites it with sexual hydrogen. This exercise is regenerative and helps a lot with health issues. Sublimation shouldn't be done, but once a day, for 10 minutes. We can do 5 minutes sublimating the energy of one of the gonads and then 5 minutes the other, or we can alternate them between each breath. 10 minutes a day is enough. The ideal time for sublimation is between 4 and 6 in the morning, when one is waking up and the vital body has replenished the energy of the physical body. Nothing else is required. As you practice, you will realize how simple but extremely useful this practice is. Another of the external aspects that we must take into account are the places and the larva. The larvae are remnants of expelled energy. They are like energetic worms that seek to generate excitement in us so that they can feed on our energy. There are many places that one visits that are full of larvae: theaters, cemeteries, brothels, residences, motels, hotels, nightclubs, churches, erotic movie theaters, etc. A person goes to sleep in a hotel and can see the bed very clean, but if he sees that bed internally with clairvoyance, he can see how it is full of larvae due to all the spillage of sexual energy that constantly take place in them. Places such as theaters, cinemas, concerts, churches are also usually full of larvae because they lead people to expel a lot of emotional energy. Cemeteries, being places where there are decomposing bodies, are places that we should always avoid because they are full of larvae, and when we go to these places, these larvae adhere to our vital body, sucking our energy. If we put a pinch of sulfur inside the shoes, the sulfur prevents the larvae from climbing on them and reaching our bedroom. It is advisable to always avoid these places, but if for some reason we must visit any of these places, it is good to cleanse ourselves and our space with a swastika cross. This is done by drawing the figure of the moving cross or swastika with sulfur on a tile, and then burning that sulfur with alcohol. This moving cross symbolizes sexual force. It is important to differentiate it from the Nazi swastika that goes the other way. While the sulfur is burning, it is important to leave the windows open to ventilate the place, and leave that place, so as not to directly inhale the sulfur vapors. After the sulfur burns, we discard it. Another point to take into account is menstruation. During a woman's menstrual process, the couple should sleep separately for several reasons. During menstruation, the energy of the woman is going through a process of involution, and this energy attracts the energy of the man towards involution as well. On the other hand, menstruating women produce many larvae. That is why it is not advisable for her to sleep in the same bed where they practice the supra-sex, nor for the man to sleep with her. Furthermore, any caress during that week revives dead defects. An important recommendation for women is to not wet their head, spine, or sexual organs during menstruation, but only do local baths with a damp cloth. Getting wet during menstruation causes menstrual cramps and generates sexual coldness in women. And it is important to know that the menstrual process lasts 7 days, regardless of whether the bleeding lasts fewer days. Therefore, during these 7 days, the woman shouldn't wash her hair or bathe directly, and should not sleep in the same bed where she practices sexual intercourse with her partner. Now let's look at some aspects directly related to the practice of supra-sex. We must keep in mind that we must always ask for the assistance of our Divine Father and Mother before starting to practice sex. We should never practice without first doing the Bellalin conjuration and the magic circle, because if not, we are exposed to attacks. It is also very important to control the mind to have good concentration during sexual practice. Lack of concentration in practice is the cause of sexual falls. These happen because we allow the mind to wander. Our consciousness is where our mind is. We must concentrate on the rise of energy to the point between the eyebrows through the spine. When practicing sex, one should concentrate on one's own sexual glands and spine, not in the body or sexual organs of our partner, because this would only lead to overexcitement and loss of energy. All movements made during sexual practice must be soft. We must avoid sudden or rapid movements to avoid overexcitement and orgasm. At all times during the practice, we must remain in the present moment so that it is our consciousness that lives and directs the sexual practice. The bedroom must be kept in perfect hygienic conditions and with good ventilation. Remember that masters in other dimensions come to that place to help us with our work. It is recommended that the couple not use old mattresses, or those that have been previously used for fornication, because they are full of lava. For those getting married, it is recommended not to spend the honeymoon in hotels, because the beds in these hotels are black beds. Although they appear very clean on the outside, these hotels and motels are haunts of the Black Lodge. And one last point, which is also very important to take into account, is the caresses that boyfriends or husbands make to each other, but at times when they are not going to have sex. Most people are unaware that caresses activate sexual energy. This energy is activated even from the first kiss and caress. But it happens that, if that energy doesn't ascend, or evolve, then it must inevitably descend, or devolve. What does this mean? That when sexual energy is activated, or excited outside of the moments in which that energy is going to be transmuted in the practice of supra-sex, this energy becomes dense and ends up contaminating. Later, this person will go to bed and have a nocturnal emission, or if later they go to have sexual practice with their partner, by already bringing that heavy or contaminated energy, they will have a sexual fall. Activating sexual energy only during the practice of sex will also help us to have a lot of sexual power during the practice. All these recommendations that we have seen on this topic are very valuable, and if we truly want to achieve perfect chastity, they will be very useful to us. Thank you very much for participating in this topic. I invite you to our next conference in which we will talk about a fairly important topic. We will talk in detail about the eye of witchcraft. We will understand in this topic that we all have the witch self within us and that it is necessary to eliminate it. Additionally, we will see the big differences between a black magician and a white magician. Don't miss it.